American movies and war go hand in hand. Epic blockbusters about combat sweep at award ceremonies, attract high praise, and challenge what the meaning of a soldier is. But it didn't used to be like that. The 40s, 50s, and 60s were a complicated time, but one thing you could count on was for movies to glamorize going to fight, for them to show a hero who was stomping around in a foreign country to beat up the bad guys. But there was a huge culture change around this time too. How people thought of war was permanently shifted, and movies reflected this too, mostly. It turns out the government didn't want people to have this change though. They were happy with complacent citizens accepting the status quo, and this influenced a lot of cinema at the time, which raises the question, how did the perceptions of war change in media, and why did it happen? But the best way to find this was to look back at film around the time of wars and see how they progressed over the last 80 years. America may have joined World War II a little late, but that didn't stop them from pumping out whatever media they wanted about it. A big part of this was animation. Disney and other studios were making content selling the idea of fighting. We finally got confirmation that Donald Duck was in fact not a fascist in the short The Führer's Face, where he lives in a Nazi-controlled territory with swastika clouds in the sky and he must hail every picture of Hitler he sees. This is blatant propaganda. America good, Germany bad. It's not wrong, Germany is bad, but it's setting a standard for America to always be good, which isn't as true later in the century. But the Nazis couldn't be a threat forever. World War II came to an end, and America was left without a villain for their stories. For about 3 years, and then they entered the Cold War because what is there to do but raise political tensions? Nazis move aside, Soviets were the new powerhouse. Nuclear warfare, communism, things were looming on the horizon, and what better way to inspire confidence than with just really bad movies? Films like Conspirator, I Married a Communist, and The Commies Are Coming weren't movies that had much to say other than communism bad, capitalism good. But this was very much intentional. The Commies Are Coming, also titled Red Nightmare, lists the little-known organization under its production companies known as the U.S. Department of Defense. And Warner Brothers. This film was originally used for government purposes, but was later released to American television and as an educational film in schools to mold public opinion and grow general hysteria because the government is just cool like that. But the Red Scare overall wasn't too big of a difference in World War II. No, things would really change in the 70s with the end of the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was a different time in America compared to the last two, because suddenly the public didn't like war anymore. There were a couple of different reasons for this. Decades of tensions were tiring people out. Frankly, living on the edge isn't fun. But the Vietnam War also had large media coverage and news broadcasts. Footage was coming back from the war as it happened, and people didn't like what they saw at all. Peace movements and calls to pull out the troops were all the rage during the conflict. But then, a few years after the Vietnam War, something crazy started to happen. Movies started showing reality. Films like I Married a Communist weren't gone, but now they had the competition of films facing the traumas of war. The Deer Hunter shows fictionalized trauma for 3 soldiers in Vietnam, and people still haven't forgotten that story. It was a part of a new generation of movies that weren't necessarily anti-war, but weren't making fighting look glamorous either. People had PTSD, brutal injuries, were questioning their ethics, and forced to face their own morality, a sentiment that was reflected in the public perceptions of war at the time. Basically, the censorship was gone. People were making movies mostly for their own free will, and sending the messages they wanted to send. The directors could build off their own experiences and put it to screen, or they could make something about the great American heroes they love. But it was their choice now. Now they could do what they wanted to do. War movies have stayed very popular, but the changes post-Vietnam haven't changed at all. We still get heroic tales of soldiers, but now the brutalities of combat aren't hidden away, and war films have only gone bigger in variety. We've gone to a point where we can make comedies about wars. We can show all kinds of perspectives because we grew past trying to sell one image of war. So Hollywood went from being a propaganda machine controlled by the government to producing films that expose people to horrors. And now we have a nice mutation of the two that gives different perspectives a chance. The moral of the story here is to never trust the government.